Hello, everybody, and good evening. Welcome to the virtual public meeting for the Transit Vision Plan. I did want to just start it off very briefly with a few quick instructions. This is a Zoom line, and we have it set up so as you come in, your line is going to be muted. We will offer opportunities on the call to unmute your line. We're going to have a few spots where we pause and take comments and have some discussion. So please keep that in mind. We also have the chat button down at the bottom of your screen. You can use that to ask questions at any time. We will be monitoring the chat, and we will also have a few polls that will appear on the screen when we get farther into the meeting this evening. And finally, just we will be monitoring, making sure everybody's muted. So please make sure you stay muted on the line. And I think also your cameras are automatically off, but there might be opportunities to turn on your cameras later if you would like to share your thoughts. So with that said, I'm going to hand it off, and we will go ahead and get started with our meeting.
Great. I will go next. Can you guys hear me okay? Good. We're good on sound. I'm Christine Jacobs. I'm the Executive Director of the Thomas Jefferson Planning District Commission. I want to first and foremost thank you all for taking of your time in an evening to share your input and share and give of your own expertise and give us feedback on this draft plan. The Regional Transit Vision Plan is supported from a grant from the Department of Rail and Public Transportation, as well as local matches from the City of Charlottesville and Albemarle County. In addition to this on-a-line event, we've done several different outreaches, including focus groups. We have a survey that we're going to have in-person events at the transit. We're doing the best we can to try to reach transit riders, transit dependent riders, future transit riders. So we really do appreciate you taking the time to do this. I'd like to introduce the lead staff on this project at the TJPDC. That's Lucinda Shannon. She's a senior regional planner here at the PDC. And then I'd also like to introduce our consulting team. We have Tim Brule from AECOM. We have Scudder Wag from Jarrett Walker and Associates, and Will Cockerell from EPR, here to provide project updates for you. I'm now going to turn the microphone over to Tim.
Great. Thank you, Christine. And welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Tim Brule. I am a transportation planner and project manager with AECOM based out of Arlington, Virginia. Before we get started, I do want to highlight that we are currently conducting an online public survey, and that's open through July 22nd. The web link and the QR code will bring you to the project website where you can access the survey along with detailed project background, interim work products, and additional feedback options. So tonight we'll be providing a background on the study and then going over the transit vision statement, goals, and objectives. And then the bulk of our meeting will be discussing our different transit vision concepts. And then we'll go over the next steps and have an opportunity for Q&A and open discussion. And throughout the presentation, we will have those opportunities for feedback using various polling options, and also some discussion breaks where you could raise your hand and unmute your line for discussion. And also, please utilize the chat box with any thoughts throughout the presentation, and we'll try to address those during those discussion breaks. So we'll go over the background of where we've been and the work that remains. So the project was initiated in the fall of 2021. This is a collaborative effort to evaluate and establish a clear long-term vision for transit service in the region. So the project is led by the TJPDC and funded in part by DRPT and the local jurisdictions. As you can see in the process graphic on the screen, we are approaching the end of our project, where we have developed our draft network concepts and are soliciting input and evaluating those outcomes. We are anticipating finalizing the study by late summer 2022, so August, September timeframe. Again, the project website, the link on the screen, is the best place to find information on the study, including our intermediate work products and meeting summaries to date, as well as information on upcoming engagement efforts, including the survey and focus groups and other feedback options. As you can see, we in the work to date, as I mentioned, we started in the fall 2021 with some background research and analysis, which was transit propensity and land use analysis. Also in the fall, we did have a robust stakeholder coordination effort where we talked about regional and community priorities with the Regional Transit Partnership and other interest groups. During the fall and winter phase, we conducted our first public meeting, where again we talked about those community goals and priorities related to transit, and we also had a public survey at that time as well. During the winter months and finalized during the March 2022, we drafted our draft vision statement memo, and that was a result of those stakeholder and public conversations we were having. Again, also in March 22, we had a core design retreat with our service providers, with CAT and Jaunt, and also UTS, to talk about to discuss the service needs and priorities, and as an initial step to develop our vision concepts that we'll go over today. Next. So I did want to go over the transit vision statement. Last time we discussed with the public was those higher level transit priorities for the region. And so this is the culmination of those efforts. So this was one of our immediate work products, that was to develop a transit vision statement for the region. The draft transit vision statement technical memo can be viewed on the project website. So the public and stakeholder, the vision statement effort was a public and stakeholder-led effort to identify those transit priorities and goals for the region. Three main goals really bubbled up in our conversations, and those include equity, meaning expand opportunities for all residents and represents the needs of both the urban and rural communities. Multimodality, meaning reduce reliance on automobiles, including improving the effectiveness and utility of the transit network. Consider transit supportive land uses and other multimodal solutions, including biking and walking, intercity rail, etc. And also climate change and environmental protection. So how can the transit network specifically help protect the environment and contribute towards climate action? So we did establish the goals and objectives and measures to track towards the transit vision across 3 different timeframes. So the immediate, and those are evaluated as part of this transit vision plan study. The near term, and those measures would be evaluated over the next 5 to 10 years as the vision is implemented, and long term to be evaluated 10 plus years out as the vision matures towards realization. And the proposed vision statement reads as follows. Develop, design, and provide transit in the Charlottesville area in a manner that reflects a collaborative, inclusive, and equitable process representing needs in both urban and rural areas. This transit system expands opportunities for all residents, equity, reduces reliance on automobiles, multimodality, and helps protect the environment, climate change mitigation. And so we do have a poll set up, and these are the specific goals that we've identified as part of our transit vision. And so we do want to hear back from you of these goals for future regional transit system, which is the most important, which is the most importance to you. So 1, enhance, provide high quality and high frequency transit options in the busiest parts of the region. Expand the region's transit service to more neighborhoods, towns, and places, and increase basic transit connectivity. Connect, promote efficient and attractive multimodal connectivity for seamless regional travel. Collaborate, improve internal and external communication with transit agencies and with local governments to increase transit supportive land use decisions. Improve equity, improve transit access for people with low income, limited physical mobility, or lack of access to automobiles. Grow equitably, create a strong linkage between transit and compact, walkable, robust transit supportive and equitable land use with safe access and egress conditions. Support, enhance the region's economy and economic well-being of its residents by improving access to employment opportunities and community services. And last, sustainability and climate, minimize the environmental impact of the region's transportation system. So we are about to launch a poll. So what is your top goal of those ones I just described? And then also in the chat box, are there any other goals that are important to you that we did not necessarily cover within these 8 goals that I just mentioned? We'll just wait and see as the responses come in.
Got just, I think, 2 or 3 more folks if you want to respond. If you haven't responded yet, we're going to close the poll in just a moment. All right. Here you go, Tim. We've got her responses in.
Yeah, so it looks like so about 80% of the folks on the call have responded, and expand looks to be the top goal that we identified here, followed by enhance and improve equity as a tied for second. And then just looking at the chat, Marta says, expand the equity goal to specifically include seniors. Aging is a form of diversity that often has limited access, and 19% of the region is over 65. Yes, and that's a great point, and I think you know we definitely have looked at that specific demographic in our analysis. And Lisa says we need drivers. Yes, we have a shortage of drivers for regular routes. Love to see routes coordinated with school routes to help kids get to school. Yes, that is a comment that we've heard throughout this process, and you know, I don't think Charlottesville is alone in the driver shortage in the industry. And that's definitely something to consider as we are, you know, expanding services. Okay, with that, I guess well I could if anyone wants to raise their hand and speak to any additional thoughts before we leave this section of the presentation? I don't think I see anyone.
I don't think I see any of your hands raised. Will, do you?
I don't see any. I think we're move on.
Okay. With that, I will pass it off to Scudder Wag of Jarrett Walker and Associates to go over our vision concepts. Scudder.
Thank you, Tim. Let me know if at any time anyone can't hear me well. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all in the region again about this potential for transit expansion and improvement. And we have developed two vision concepts to help you all see the range of what a transit expansion could do in terms of achieving some of those goals. Some of those goals are achieved through the provision of transit service, which is the thing that we're often most focused on in what transit is trying to do. Some of those other goals are achieved in the way that transit and land use are planned together, or in the various ways that investment in capital improvements in transit, such as your fuel choices, your multimodal connectivity happen. But at a fundamental level, most of these goals are achieved through how and where you provide transit service and when and what that achieves for people. So we have a constrained and an unconstrained vision concept to show you that helps to imagine what a possible expanded transit network can achieve for your region. The constrained network is constrained by a funding level assumption around centered around the level of funding through tax resources that could be achieved if you applied a similar set of taxes and fees associated with other regional authorities that are used across Virginia. In particular, the Central Virginia Transportation Authority in the Richmond region was used as an example of if you applied a similar tax and fee approach at the regional scale, how many dollars could you produce? About $26 million in regional funding for transit would come from a similarly designed taxing structure, assuming you put most of those dollars into regional transit and continued to build upon the $9.5 million you get in federal and state funding, and would therefore have an approximate budget of $36 million a year to support transit service in the region. For comparison purposes, the pre-pandemic budgets for CAT and JAUNT combined were just less than $20 million. So it gives you a sense of the scale we're talking about. The second vision concept we'll show you is unconstrained in the sense that working with regional staff from the transit agencies, regional planning staff, what would a set of transit services look like that's trying to build a network to meet really all of these goals that we've been talking about, as well as we think is reasonable, and meet the land use, climate, and other policy goals without thinking about a defined limit on a budget. And that would cost about $70 million a year to run the service in today's dollars terms. Another way of thinking about how much more service is in these concepts is to look at what we call the service hours. So a service hour is 1 hour of a bus running on a street, or 1 hour of a demand response vehicle out in service, picking up and dropping off people. And the number of service hours represents a basic quantification of how much service, how much opportunity for people to use transit is out there. And it tends to scale with cost of service. And today, there's about 131,000 service hours annually being spent across both CAT and JAUNT in serving the region. The constrained vision includes about 125% more service hours in total. And the unconstrained vision includes about 422% increase in total service hours. And that gives you some sense of that scale of how much more service would be provided across the region. As we go through thinking about these networks, one of the things we'll talk about two ways of looking at how these concepts can improve people's access to opportunity, improve people's ability to get places. And one is a measure of how many people are near service. That lets us think about how we're doing in providing a basic level of coverage and a baseline level of there's something there for people. And then another way we'll look at things is the increase in access to jobs and opportunity, meaning in particular, how much can you reach by transit? Giving us a sense of how useful is transit to people's lives and how useful is it at potentially moving lots of people and therefore getting a lot of people to ride transit and potentially not using cars. So first, let's look at the constrained vision. As I mentioned, this is constrained by that estimated budget of what a regional taxing authority might achieve, similar to the CVTA in the Richmond area, and assuming most of those dollars go towards transit. Very quickly, just to show you the maps of what's served. These maps are in the report on the project website. They're in the survey. They're on the project website. You can look at them in more detail there. And all of those maps are color coded by the frequency of service, meaning how often a bus shows up, which determines how long you have to wait for service. And waiting time is quite often an enormous factor in your potential travel time by transit. And in red are services that run every 15 minutes. You see a red line going through Main Street downtown and out High Street. A dark blue line means service every 30 minutes. So you see 30-minute service on 5th Street. You see 30-minute service on Georgetown and Commonwealth. A purple line means service every 20 minutes. So in between that, and you see that on, for example, Hillsdale, Emmett with Route 7. And then a light blue line or teal colored line means a service every 60 minutes. And you see that in many other corridors where you have hourly service in today's network. So on the left is the urbanized area service, and on the right is the rural area services. The most rural area services today are on demand or limited trip, so they're in these brownish colors. But as I'll talk about in a minute, there's some important differences, even though there's not more things on the map in the regional network, there is more service in some ways in the regional network. So some of the big differences relative to today's network are things like the Route 7 would be every 20 minutes instead of every 30 minutes. The routes 2A and 2B with service on Avon would operate every 30 minutes, meaning every 15 minutes total in combined service on that corridor. Route 4 would be every 30 minutes. There would be an extension of Route 7 to go towards the airport and the North Fork Research Park with hourly service. The relatively frequent trolley service would be extended towards Pantops and would have 2 30-minute services branching into Fontana and into South Pantops. And there would be a continuation of the planned on-demand transit zones in Pantops and the 29 North Corridor. There would, very importantly, be consistent 7-day-a-week service. So there may not be as many big extensions and expansions on the map of service in this constrained network as you maybe might think would be possible with a big expansion. But one of the things that's really lacking, and this is a chart of existing service or baseline service, showing in those colors, red every 15 minutes or better, dark blue every 30 minutes or better, teal every 60 minutes. Weekdays, most routes end by 9 p.m. A few routes run a bit later to 11 p.m. or so. And they're, most routes are not very frequent. On Saturdays, most routes end by 9 p.m. There's a few that run to 11 p.m., but not much later. And on Sunday, you only have 6 routes that operate. And again, most of them end before 9 p.m. That's very limited service in the evening. It's extremely limited service on Sunday. And many people working in retail, hospital, service jobs where you have to work on the weekend, this is a network that's not going to be useful to those folks. So this constrained vision includes a significant expansion of those hours of service, running till midnight on most services, and running 7 days a week consistently. And that's a significant improvement in people's ability to go places and do things all week long, and is really critical to a lot of those low to middle wage jobs in other sectors of the economy. I mentioned before that one way of measuring success is how many people are near service, which gives us a look at proximity to some kind of service. And this chart is a chart that breaks that down in the urbanized area. So this is looking at within the MPO area, residents who are served by any kind of service, and then divided into how frequent that service is. So in total, about 60% of people have some kind of service in today's network, but about 35% have access to something that's 30 minutes or better. And less than 10% have service that's 10 minutes or better. And you can see the similar pattern with jobs. Only about 70% of jobs are covered. About 30% of jobs are near relatively frequent service, 10-minute or 15-minute or 20-minute, in part because you have so many jobs downtown, so many jobs at the university and the hospital, which are near some of those many of those more frequent services. And we can look at low-income residents. About 75% have access to something, or households without cars. And we can compare all of this for different types of people, including seniors. Someone asked about seniors earlier. You see the percentage of seniors served is actually lower than it is for residents on average. And that's because a lot of seniors in this region tend to live farther out on average than younger residents do, and are therefore harder to reach because they're further out from the central and core areas. So we can compare all of this to the residents who have access to something in the constrained network, and the numbers in terms of total percent served don't go up dramatically with the constrained network, because the constrained network doesn't extend service drastically across large new areas. But you do see some significant improvements in people who have access to more frequent services, such as 30-minute services or 15-minute services. And you see the jobs numbers of how many jobs are served by 15-minute or 20-minute services go up significantly. So now 45% of jobs are near 20-minute or better services in this constrained network. And low-income residents, you see now 40% are near 20-minute or better service. And households without cars, almost 50% are near 20-minute or better service, versus only 30% in the existing network. So there's some significant improvements in those aspects of the proximity to service. Another important piece to consider is people's access to opportunity. And a way to think about this is Jane. She lives in a city where there's lots of places she might want to go. This bubble tells us how far she can get in 45 minutes by walking in transit. By walking, the amount of time she has to wait, the amount of time she travels on the vehicle, the amount of time she walks once she gets off the vehicle, this is how far she can get. And then this is all of that stuff that's in that bubble. And you can almost think about this as the wall around her life. If she relies on transit, these are the things she can reasonably reach for daily needs, because 45 minutes might be her willingness to travel, and 45 minutes round trip means an hour and a half of traveling to work or to school or to shopping or to all sorts of different things. And so we can measure this kind of thing in lots of different places in the region and look at how it changes. So this is just one example from, say, Fashion Square Mall. If you happen to live near there, or if you had a business there, you might be really interested to know you can reach 53,800 jobs today in an hour of travel time. And you can reach 46,500 residents. And that's also a useful measure to know. For example, if you had a business here, you wanted better access to workers or customers, this tells us something about that use and that value. And if you live there, this tells us there's 53,000 jobs you can reach. And those jobs not just represent places you might work, they also represent shopping centers, hospitals, medical centers that you might want to go where there are lots of jobs that represent things that might be important to you. And then this comparison shows us that in the constrained network, you can get a little bit farther. There's a little bit more places you can access in these orange areas. That's beyond where you can get to today. And there's a significant increase in those jobs and residents that you can reach in that period of time. And when we do that kind of measure over and over and over again across the region, in the urbanized area, we can see in this constrained vision, these dark green areas are areas where you see really big increases in job access. Over 25,000 or more newly reachable jobs from those areas. So significant improvements in areas off of Avon, just south of the community college, but also in large swaths of the city of Charlottesville, big increases in jobs that are reachable. For many areas along the 29 corridor, big increases in jobs that are reachable because of improved frequency or new extensions of service in the constrained vision. And when we average that across all of the people in all of the places of the urbanized area, we see that on average, the typical person can reach about 12% more jobs. The important thing to note is this is just looking at the improvement at midday on a weekday. And so this is only considering those improvements in frequency that you see comparing the constrained vision map to the existing vision map. This doesn't account for all of the improvements in access you have on Sundays and later in the evening, where today you may have much lower access levels because there's just not as much service those times of day. Beyond the urbanized area, there's an important thing to note about improvements in some of the demand responsive type services. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the demand responsive type services that exist or are planned, there's a couple of different kinds of demand responsive services that are exist or could exist in the future. One of those is ADA paratransit service. That's the service that is required to be provided by federal regulation within 3/4 of a mile of fixed route services and must be provided for people who are eligible based on a certified disability. And that's a service Jaunt provides on behalf of CAT within areas that are a 3/4 of a mile from fixed route services. So you have to be eligible, and it's only required within 3/4 of a mile. There are other services Jaunt provides that we would call demand response services, where the general public may be able to use them in certain zones, in certain areas of Albemarle County and other counties in rural areas beyond Albemarle County. And most of those services require you to book a day ahead. So there's not much spontaneity involved in those, and they have relatively limited hours of service today. They may only be able to take you into Charlottesville in the morning and back out in the afternoon at relatively limited hours, for example. There's another type of service called on-demand transit, sometimes called microtransit, which is often booked with a smartphone app or by calling in or on a website, where you can make a same-day reservation, or you can call and request a trip and get a trip within 30 to 60 minutes. This is not something that's currently available, but is being planned to happen in Pantops and in Route 29 in the near future. And these are usually within specified zones. And it obviously provides much more spontaneity, much more opportunity to go when you want to. But that tool has some limitations in where it is a viable and cost-effective thing that you can do to serve people. When we look at what's available today, those kinds of day-ahead reservation services are available in many parts of Albemarle County, in Livingston, in Fluvanna County, in Louisa County, in Greene County. Their hours of service are often limited. For example, Fluvanna County is only available 3 days a week. Louisa County, it's available 6 a.m. to 5 p.m., but only 5 days a week. The constrained vision would be able to fund a significant expansion of those into services that are available 13 hours a day across all of these jurisdictions, and therefore provide a significant expansion of people's ability to go places, although it would still require day-ahead reservation. And then Jaunt currently runs a number of services, connect services, they're called, that are kind of like express trips to and from Charlottesville for people who are commuting in for work. Many of them only have a couple of trips, 2 or 3 trips a day, perhaps. The Crozet services are a bit more significant with 7 trips per day. The constrained vision includes a significant expansion of those services and some additional services such as a Palmyra Connect service and others that would provide between 5 and 12 trips per day across those Connect services, and would significantly improve that access to jobs from some of the more rural parts of the region into Charlottesville and Albemarle and the urbanized parts of the region. So that's a summary of the constrained.
Let's see, Scudder, you did have one question in the chat from Hal Morgan.
Yep.
He asked about the CVTA tax and fee structure. Can you provide more specifics of what these taxes and fees entail, and how much money are we talking about?
Yeah. So the CVTA structure is they use a 0.7% sales tax and I believe a 7.5 cent fuel and diesel tax across the various jurisdictions in their region. In their region, those taxes produce, I think, something on the order of like $100 million a year. In this region is smaller, has fewer people, and so would not produce as much revenue, which is why I think in the earlier slide I said it would be something on the order of about $27 million a year that those same levels could produce. I want to very much clarify that we are not suggesting those are the right specific approaches you should use. The Northern Virginia Transportation Authority is another regional authority that uses different tax sources. I believe a recordation tax is one of them that they use. And Hampton Roads has a regional transit, a recent regional transit fund that uses recordation taxes and hotel taxes as a resource. Other communities and other states that we've worked in have used sales taxes, rental car taxes, income taxes, or other as their state legislatures have allowed. So I hope that answers your question. And we have a poll we'd like to ask. And while we ask that, we would also like to get other questions. Are there other questions in here that we need to answer? But while we're doing that poll, we can also take some other questions or give people an opportunity to raise their hand if they want to verbally ask a question. And the poll question we've got for you is, would you make use of these improved transit services in the constrained vision plan? And again, if you have a nuance to your answer, we'd love for you to put that into the chat box. And if we have other questions that folks have, this is a great time to put them in the chat box or raise a hand.
Looks like Hal did raise his hand, so.
Okay.
um,
So Scudder, could you provide as part of your final report, some examples of what other jurisdictions do in terms of, how they raise funds for this type of transit improvements? I think it'd be very helpful. I mean, just to say the CVTA does, raises funds, but not to explain it in detail. I think more detail of what other jurisdictions do in Virginia, state of Virginia, would be very helpful.
Okay. I think it's something we've done some research on already, and I think we can put pen to paper to put that in the report.
Looks like we have Linda Glover has raised her hand.
Good afternoon. I'm the community health worker for Louisa and Fluvanna. My question to y'all is, are the transit going to do more hours in between now? Is that what you're saying, or it's just running more days out of the week?
So the existing circulator services in Fluvanna generally run 8:30 to 4 p.m. today. And under this constrained vision scenario, we've estimated that they could run 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. And run 7 days a week, whereas today Fluvanna is just 3 days a week. Does that answer your question?
That's part of it. What
Okay.
my main concern is in Fluvanna, one of the things that the people down there complain about is that when they go to doctor's appointments, the transit comes and pick them up, but they have to sit like 4 or 5 hours before another one come and pick them up.
So do you mean when they're taking trips, say from Fluvanna to Charlottesville to go to the doctor?
Yes.
Okay. So I believe some of that would be improved with the expanded and improved Connect services that are planned here. Although there's a certain amount of detail we haven't gotten into yet about exactly the timing of everything. So I can't say for sure that they would have only a 2-hour wait in the future or something like that.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Looks like we've got about 71% have responded to the poll so far. So we'll still take questions and wait just a moment and see if we get a few more responses on the poll.
Another thing that I think someone's already answered, Liz, looks like she's already answered, is, in the chat box, we'd love to hear how would this vision affect your life or improve the community for you. So if you have a thought on that, we'd certainly like to hear it. So we've got, looks like 20% of you definitely think you would make use of these improved services, 40% probably, and about 40% probably not. And that's good to hear that the majority of you feel like you would probably make use of these. And those of you who might not, I can understand, since these services may not reach you directly, but I hope you might find value in them nonetheless. We have one other poll question as well. Would you support a regional transit authority and the funding levels to realize a constrained vision, or realize this constrained vision? And again, if you have nuance to your answer, or you have additional questions about this constrained vision, feel free to put those thoughts in the chat box or raise your hand to help provide some additional context.
We've got about 50% of folks on the line have responded to the poll so far. We'll wait just few more moments. And again, if you have any additional questions, please raise your hand and we can take your questions.
And another thing to note is that if you have specific thoughts on places in the constrained vision that might deserve more service or be worthy of additional consideration as we draft or finish drafting this plan. These are draft concepts of what's possible, and they're ideas for you to respond to. And I think I see someone already in the chat box suggesting why is there's such dismal service in Palmyra. Today, most service in the rural jurisdictions is dependent on the funding from general funds that each jurisdiction is willing to provide. And the regional funding would significantly increase above and beyond the levels that most of the regional or the more rural jurisdictions are providing today, which would, in most cases, significantly enhance services in those rural areas. You have some hands?
We've got 60% reporting in on the poll, and
Okay.
Nina Knight has your hand raised.
Nina? You need
Nina,
to unmute.
You can unmute.
Gosh, I don't even know where to even begin to start, which is the appropriate time. But I'm just noticing that in general, there seems to be, I don't know if this is just since the pandemic, but a lack of just in general respect for the writer's time. And by that, I mean, like, before the pandemic, I felt free to like go up to drive and like have buses held, not, but I mean, like to make connections, to make connections between various routes.
Mm-hmm.
I could do that a lot easier. And now I just can't. Now, no, I mean, it was just a general lack of respect for the writer's time.
So,
like
in the past, if a bus had gotten late to the downtown transfer center and you were trying to catch another and they were about to pull off, someone might have been more willing to hold for you.
Yes.
Okay.
And that hasn't been happening. As I just feel like now it's just that's completely changed.
That's unfortunate, and I'm sorry to hear about that. I know a lot of operators have been very stressed because there's been such a shortage of bus operators that many of them are working a lot of overtime, and I imagine that's part of it.
Right.
But I appreciate the thought, and that's something to pass on to CAT staff about immediate challenges.
Yeah.
I did close the poll. We had 60% who reported in on the poll, but it's like 92% answered yes to the poll question.
Okay. Well, thank you for your thoughts on that, on the constrained vision. And now we'd like to tell you a bit more about the unconstrained vision, which is a more expansive vision. Just a reminder of what the existing network looks like across the region and across the urbanized area, again, color-coded by frequency. And you don't see many red lines, and you don't even see many dark blue lines on the urbanized area map on the left. The unconstrained vision in the rural areas includes a significant expansion of fixed route services, so all-day services going from Charlottesville to Crozet, to Ruckersville, to Louisa and Zion's Crossroad, to Palmyra, to Esmont, Scottsville, and to Lovingston. So, and supplemented in these rural areas with some on-demand transit, meaning you could make a same-day reservation in zones like Esmont, Scottsville, or Lake Monticello, or Zion's Crossroad. And in the urbanized area on the left, you see a significant increase in the frequency of service across many key corridors like 5th Street, that's every 15 minutes, every 10-minute service along the US 29 corridor, and 30-minute service across many other corridors. So a significant increase in that frequency of service, as well as extensions and expansions in a number of areas beyond where today's network goes. Extensions such as those all-day fixed routes going to Crozet, to Livingston, to Monticello, all the way up to the airport. So some of those significant improvements, like the extension to the airport in Fontaine Research Park, some significant improvements so that almost every route within an urbanized area is running every 30 minutes or better within Charlottesville. Those 60-minute services to regional destinations. And then high frequency corridors with really short waits on a lot of critical major destinations, the US 29 corridor to downtown Charlottesville, Pantops to Fontaine Research Park through downtown, 5th Street and Avon Street to the south of the city, and the Massey, Alderman, and Gray corridor, Route 16. On-demand transit zones in US 29 and Pantops in the more urbanized area, as well as those others in the rural areas I mentioned. And that Route 7 would be upgraded to a bus rapid transit corridor. And that means investment in things like dedicated bus lanes in some sections of that Route 7 corridor, or what we call Q-jump lanes, where you might have a dedicated space at major intersections where the bus can go around traffic waiting, signal priority so that buses have a special signal or can hold a green light longer and therefore be able to travel faster, and dedicated stops that are spaced more widely apart so that buses go faster on average and people can get where they're going more quickly. And so many communities have used these kinds of tools to create bus rapid transit corridors that have significantly improved access, particularly on major job corridors like the US 29 corridor, where you have access to UVA, you have access to so many jobs and opportunities up that major commercial corridor. So the GRTC Pulse on Broad Street in Richmond is perhaps the one most famous in Virginia and relatively recent. There's also the Metroway corridor in Arlington and Alexandria, which has dedicated bus lanes for a large part of its corridor. The Flash in Montgomery County, Maryland, and CT Fast Tracks in Connecticut are two other examples of significant bus rapid transit corridors that have been quite successful at expanding opportunity, improving access, and encouraging more people to use transit because it's easier, it's faster, and it gets you where you're going sooner. When we're going and looking at those measures of success, like proximity to service, the baseline on the left of what you have today and how that would improve with this unconstrained vision, and you see the expansions and extensions in the urbanized area covering more people, so that now 7% more residents are covered and 5% more jobs are covered, and another 7% of low-income residents are covered with something. But just as important as that raw coverage number, meaning that these gray bars are going down because there are fewer people who aren't served, is more of these bars are becoming those darker red colors, meaning really useful service to many people, such as 56% of jobs would have service every 10 minutes in this unconstrained vision. 41% of low-income residents would be near service every 10 minutes. And 44% of households without cars would be near service every 10 minutes. That's an enormous improvement in access to opportunity for people in need. And you see a similar pattern for residents of color. As I mentioned, in the rural areas, you've got a significant new and for the first time, fixed route all-day services to significant towns in rural areas like Scottsville, Livingston, Crozet, Palmyra, and Louisa, and Ruckersville, 7 days a week. And those new on-demand zones serving some of the more moderate density places out in the rural areas that or small towns, such as Esmont Scottsville, for example, or the town of Louisa or Zion's Crossroad. And while the numbers aren't necessarily that impressive, these same kind of proximity numbers tell us that we're starting to really reach a good many people even in these more rural communities. So on the top is the baseline network in Greene County and how many residents and jobs are served by some kind of transit. And today, the only kind of transit you've really got is 24-hour ahead reservation demand responsive service. And so 100% of people are covered by that, but it's pretty limited in its usefulness. And in the unconstrained vision, we've now got 3% of people and 11% of jobs that have access to a fixed route service that's going to Charlottesville, as well as have access to that 24-hour ahead on-demand service. Louisa County, you see 7% of jobs covered by fixed route service and an even larger percentage of jobs and about 8% of residents with access to that on-demand zone service that I've talked about. Fluvanna County, you see 37% of residents and a significant chunk of jobs now have access to some kind of transit service, either fixed route or on demand. And Nelson County, a smaller percentage here, about 5% of jobs and a small percent of residents here near one of these fixed route services. So when we come back and we think about, well, what kind of access to opportunity could you reach? How much opportunity could you get to? This example, again, from Fashion Square Mall, the existing or baseline network, what you could reach in an hour, and the unconstrained network showing you a vast expansion in the area and the jobs and the people that you can reach in that same travel time, significantly expanded. Basically, you can reach most of the developed area within an hour. And we do that same kind of analysis and get a heat map of how many more jobs can you reach from different parts of the urbanized area. And you see dark greens across almost most of the city of Charlottesville and large parts of the urbanized area of Albemarle County, including far up the 29 corridor. You have dark greens showing a significant improvement in access to jobs and opportunity. And even some of those lighter green colors showing improvements to access to jobs out towards Keswick, out towards Crozet, out along Ivy Road, where you have a significant extension of all-day fixed route service. And when we average that out across all of the residents in the MPO area or the urbanized area of the region, I showed you the constrained vision meant you could reach 12% more jobs on average for the typical person. And the unconstrained vision would mean 57% increase in the jobs reachable by transit in an hour, which is a vast improvement and expansion. So now that you've had a chance to see and think of for a minute about this unconstrained vision, we'd like to ask you the same question. Would you make use of these improved transit services? And also give you a chance to ask questions about what's in this unconstrained vision.
Looks like we've got comments from Hal Morgan, and if you want to check the chat, Scudder or Mr. Morgan, if you'd like to unmute and ask that question.
Yeah, so I see in the chat how you asked about, in our final report, should spend some time explaining constraints facing CAT, hiring drivers, supply chain issues, and getting new buses and bus parts. So yeah, we're definitely in a relatively unique moment right now, a moment that transit agencies, or challenges transit agencies haven't really faced in the life experience of most people who are working in transit today, in terms of labor shortage, in terms of the challenges of getting buying vehicles. We're working with transit agencies right now who it's taking them a year or more just to get delivery of vehicles of new buses, much longer than they've experienced in the past. And that's definitely a significant challenge at this moment in time. I'm hopeful it is not something that's going to last an extremely long time. And so while it may be a particular problem this year, next year, maybe continuing into the following year, we don't know. I'm hoping it's not a continuous constraint, because if it is, then that suggests lots of challenges across multiple economic sectors that's kind of beyond the capability of us to address in this vision. And so while we need to be thoughtful about it, I don't know if we want it to fully constrain what we're thinking about as what's possible for your region, if that makes sense.
Like,
It does make sense, Gary, but I do think that it needs to be at the very least a footnote talking about what the situation is in terms of this, in terms of recognizing, say, the vision that's chosen or whatever, is that there are certain outside forces that are going to change, that are going to affect how long it will take to implement any recommendations.
Right. Okay. Understandable. Yes. Because if you all made the decision tomorrow to implement a funding source, it would, at this moment in time, even if you had the dollars start to come in tomorrow, you would face a number of real constraints in actually implementing improvements, as GRTC is experiencing right now in Richmond with the new CVTA funding. So, it is important to be thoughtful about that.
Just gonna wait just a minute. We've got a few more folks who can respond to the poll, but we also have a comment in the chat from Liz Russell about a survey and effort at Monticello and how 20% of the guests who had responded to the survey indicated that they would have liked to use transit to get to Monticello, and also surveys showing that they would be likely or very likely to use public transit to get to work. So thank you, Liz, for leaving that comment there. And Liz, looks like you have your hand raised. Yes, please.
Yeah,
please.
Sure. I just wanted to offer, a little hello. I've worked with many of you. This survey was actually regarding the microtransit feasibility study, and Monticello was one of the areas considered, not chosen by the TJPDC to proceed with like the demonstration grant, but we're really optimistic that TJPDC, others will consider connectivity to Monticello in all forms, in bike ped, but in transit as well. We're really making an effort with a new VP of Diversity, Equity, Accessibility, and Inclusion, DEAI, to look at hiring a more diverse workforce, and part of that is constrained by who can get to Monticello. So that's one side of it is our staff quality of life and diversity. And then, of course, on the other hand is making it easier for our guests to get to Monticello, especially those that don't have a personal vehicle. Of course, that would alleviate traffic and parking issues that we also experience. So I will be sharing that survey. I understand it's open until July 22nd, or maybe I thought it was earlier, but I'm hoping to send that to all people in my network, and hopefully you guys will get some good feedback from that.
Well, thank you. Yes, July 22nd is the planned close date for that survey. So we sincerely appreciate you and everyone else who might be willing on this call to send the survey out to all of your networks, which Tim will hit home on in a minute. So we see, again, quite a few of you saying you probably or definitely would make use of these services. That's a fantastic thing to hear. We have two other questions we'd like to ask of you. which is one is that this unconstrained vision includes a BRT line on US 29, and would you welcome this service? And the second question, which will also come up in this next poll, is would you support the additional regional funding necessary to realize the unconstrained vision, recognizing that that is a vision that's about twice as much as the constrained vision? And again, if you have nuance to your answers as you're answering these questions, feel free to raise your hand to make a statement or ask us a question, or put your thoughts in the chat box. And as you're considering that, you could also, if you have a feeling about specific places where you'd like to see improved services in the unconstrained vision for the final plan, this is a great opportunity to give us your thoughts on that. We welcome you to raise your hand or put it in the chat box. I see many of you answering. That's great. And I would note that Lucinda has put into the chat a direct link to the survey for the project, both in English and in Spanish. So if you want to grab those direct links and share them with anyone, you can do so. All right, do we have any other questions?
We've got about 50% on the response. Hold on. About 50% on the response, so we'll leave just a little bit of time. Since we have a pause here, I know that Nina had a question. If you wanted to unmute and ask that question while we're waiting for responses on the poll.
I just had a question about a stop. Why is it that we don't have a stop by Goodwill when the bus does go all the way out to Walmart, which is beyond Goodwill?
That is a good question that I'm not sure I have an immediate answer to. Along which route?
Maybe the 5. I would imagine the 5. The 5 is what takes you to Walmart. So why wouldn't there be a stop by the Goodwill?
The Goodwill on US 29 across from the Lowe's?
Yes, yeah, it's on the US 29 area.
Aha. Well.
And Walmart is very close to the Goodwill, but not really walkable from the Walmart site.
So
Play soccer.
We're talking about the area up here north of Rio Road, near where Route 7, or the Route 7 goes to the Walmart from via Berkmar, correct?
No, I think it's the 5. It's the 5. The 5 goes to Walmart.
Well, this map. So this map is the map that we call the baseline network, which is the network that CAT is planning to run when it changes some of its routes later this year. So this may not be the right route number, but I think the short explanation is that the service that goes to Walmart is on Berkmar, and it's on Berkmar because Berkmar is a reasonably safe street to cross, and US 29 is a really challenging road to safely cross. And so that's why there's not bus service directly on it today and directly in front of the Goodwill. And that's an important note about actually the future of a potential BRT on US 29, which we asked you about here. And that is a future of a BRT service on 29 is contingent not just on adding service and getting the operating dollars to fund service, but also creating the stops on 29 and the stations and the ability to safely cross US 29 where you have those stations. And that's really important long-term in making that corridor a corridor where a lot of people want to take transit and a lot of people find transit useful and serves a lot of people well. And right now it's a really hard corridor to do that.
Yeah.
So that's that's an important thing for folks to think about long-term as you consider better transit up off of 29 there. So it doesn't exactly answer your question. I mean, that's the basic answer right now is it's on Buck Mark.
Okay. Yeah.
But there's a long-term answer here as well.
Yeah. That's why I haven't done, I like the Goodwill but I'm not going to play Frogger.
Yeah. And that's a challenge on that corridor is, you definitely feel like you're playing Frogger, no doubt.
So it looks like we're sharing the poll results there, and we've got those on the screen. It looks like 80% said yes to the first question about the BRT, and we have 90% said yes to the second question. And we also have a couple of questions here in the chat. We got Melody Jackson on here. In what ways have underrepresented voices been included in data used in the plan? We can also talk about that in some of the coming slides here.
Yeah, I think Tim will talk a little bit about that and what's been happening now during the engagement process. So I'll let him talk about that. And then Hal, I appreciate your thoughts on improved service to some of the rural counties. And we certainly have some of that already in the constrained vision in terms of some of improved and expanded circulator services and these others. And if you have specific things that you'd like to see, we welcome some additional thoughts there. So the survey includes an opportunity to provide open-ended comments, and you're welcome to provide those comments there as well. So with that, we're approaching about the last 10 minutes or so of our session. So I think I'll let Tim tell you all more about the next steps in the process.
Yeah. Thanks, Scudder, and thank you for going over the concepts we have. Again, I think we touched on this. We do have the online survey. It's open through July 22nd. So please, if you have not already, please answer. Please visit the website and take the survey. Share within your networks as liberally as you can. Also on the website is some of the more the details of some of our previous work products and other background analysis that we've completed to date. So over the next few weeks, we will be wrapping up our engagement on the vision concepts described in tonight's presentation. Again, that online survey is open through July 22nd. And then also working with CAT on engaging riders. We have an in-person event on July 12th at the Transit Center where we will have a paper survey and having that that in-person engagement. So hopefully we're talking directly with current transit riders, getting their perspective on these concepts. We also have some ongoing focus group meetings with transit-dependent populations. We've completed a few thus far with I think some senior groups, Latin American Latinos, and others that are I think as we touched on, some underrepresented populations. And we are continuing to reach out to those communities and having those conversations specifically about the concepts and how they relate to those populations. We also are conducting a postcard mailing and social media campaign. So again, directing folks to the website, directing folks to the the online survey, and hopefully are getting that feedback from those populations. So once we are wrapped up on this engagement on the concepts, we will be refining based on the feedback that we get. And then once we will analyze the vision plan outcomes based on the project goals and objectives that we've defined in earlier phases of the project. And then we'll finalize the transit vision plan and publish the final report. Again, we are aiming for a late summer 2022 end date for this project. And I think there's lots of questions about kind of what comes next once this study is over. The next phase will be a transit governance study. And so the TJPDC will initiate the transit governance study to determine a roadmap to implement the transit vision plan, including governance organization, funding and regional revenue streams. So really kind of getting more into the details of what the Charlottesville region can decide on the appropriate level of funding streams. And so that study will commence kind of as we are finalizing our study. And so that was roughly a year-long project. So the time frame is midsummer 2022 to fall 2023. And with that, we'll take this opportunity to have any other last discussion or questions from the group. Again, you could type your thoughts in the chat box or raise your hand to be unmuted. And so, I see a comment from Charlene Green. Are you doing in-person or paper surveys with our senior folk? Not every person is comfortable with online surveys. Yes, so we will have a paper survey that we will be having available at that July 12th event at the Downtown Transit Center. And we've also had some the focus group meetings, as I mentioned, with that population.
Yeah, I believe for the focus groups, or the TJPDC reached out to organizations representing seniors as part of that process.
Okay, I don't see any additional questions or comments in the chat or any hands raised. So I would like to thank everyone for joining us this evening. If PHA wasn't contacted, we will be very helpful. We will make sure that, okay, we still got some comments coming in. How can we engage with you to increase the number of people from underrepresented populations included? Certainly you could share the project website and the online survey within your networks. I think that's the most immediate thing we could do. But also, if you would like to contact the study group and we could possibly help organize additional focus group meetings. And Lucinda said, yes, you could email her, and she has listed her email address there on in the chat.
All right, great. I would love to say some parting remarks if it's the appropriate time to do so, and also to follow up on your response to that, Tim. To both Ms. Green and Ms. Jackson, a presentation was given to the Regional Housing Partnership on this transit vision plan as well. So we're hoping to use our housing network to help us get more feedback from underrepresented populations. So I sincerely appreciate that recommendation, and we would love to work with you. We definitely talked to Mr. Mathon yesterday, but happy to connect with you both directly to help us with that outreach. Thank you. And then just overall, general, sincere thank you again, giving up your time, your lived experience. Everybody's busy, and we know how important this is to our community. And we know how important it is to make sure the community has input on this vision, and that it's not a vision that's dictated, by folks that are not necessarily riding transit in this region. So, thank you for any help you can give us in helping to get the word out that we are looking for as much engagement as possible. And then if you think of something after this, as many of us process information and think of ideas, they're on the project website. There's a form that you can use to submit any comments related to the project, but you can also reach out to TJPDC staff directly via our emails and give us any feedback or suggestions or support that you can. So again, thank you so much to you all. We really appreciate you being a part of this process for our region. And with that, I think that is the close of the meeting. Thank you all. Have a great evening.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.